Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter. Today we are talking about the closing remarks on the 2025 season from Jaguars head coach Liam Cohen and general manager James Gladstone. I thought Liam and James, they spoke for about 35 minutes. It was, longer than these normally go. So, that was, of course, appreciated. I thought both, gave good insight on a lot of things. And there were some clear things that I think were the most important to kind of focus on. And, first and foremost, it has to be Travis Hunter. Everybody knew going into that press conference that Travis Hunter would be the focal point of the comments to come out of it. Obviously, you're not expecting them to have all the answers now, but you needed to hear something from them on how they plan to proceed with him. After he played just in 7 games, obviously had the non-contact knee injury, is still, several months away from returning to the field, etc. You needed to hear something from them, even if it wasn't overly concrete or overly committal. Just give a hint of what kind of direction they might go in. And they certainly gave that. James Gladstone more so. Gladstone noted that, Hunter will play on both sides of the ball next year. Well, obviously, we can start with that. That's not a surprise. I don't think that's a surprise whatsoever. I think when they took Hunter, that the entire reality was that he is going to play both sides of the ball until there was a reason that he can't. And I don't think a freak injury in practice, which is what this was, is something that says, no, he can't do it. We saw him do it. Obviously, the production, etc., varying degrees of success, but you saw Travis Hunter give them good snaps in some capacity at receiver and at cornerback last year. So I don't think there was ever an expectation that was going to change. Neither on his side nor their side. Because the sheer reality, again, is that, for that trade to be worth it, you need him to play both sides of the ball. You need him to be an elite player. And part of the whole appeal and the reason, they make that move is because he has that talent. Because he has that unique versatility. That, he can give them a player who, depending on the opponent that you're playing, the week it is, the game plan, what you need, specific matchups, you can deploy him in a number of ways. So no, I don't think a surprise at all to hear that he's going to play both ways next year. I don't think there's any scenario where, even in like the most extreme of scenarios, where his split is like 90-10 or 95-5. I don't think it's ever going to be 100-0. Or 99-1. I think he's going to give them snaps at both positions until there is something that says he can't do it. And like I said, I don't believe for a second that his non-contact injury in practice, what was a result of anything like that. So this was kind of the expected outcome in terms of the big picture. And I think it's a conversation that isn't close to being done, despite maybe what they said on Wednesday. I seriously doubt that this is the last time that we're talking about it, obviously. But I could very much so see things, simply put, changing in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, however you want to define it. I could see at any point in this offseason the Jaguars' needs changing, and okay, this is where they need Travis. And again, that's part, I think, of the beauty in getting a guy like Travis Hunter. You can play with those scenarios. Then again, that's part of, the other side of it, the double-edged sword. Sure wish, you could have a lot more clarity on what you need exactly and what the roster looks like, from how it's built out, when you know a clear answer on what he is. With that said, James Gladstone, I think obviously the biggest and most important thing that he said the entire day was that, due to expiring contracts on their roster, other factors. Right now, it looks like Travis Hunter is set to see an expanded role in defense. And he played twice the amount of snaps on offense that he did on defense last year. So they said when they picked him last year, receiver first, that's where he needs the most development. That's where he played the most. That's where he made the biggest impact. You guys have heard me give my 2 cents on it. And my 2 cents, it doesn't matter. Because the Jaguars are going to do what the Jaguars are going to do. The decision that they come to, regardless of what I think, obviously, as they should. I would have ran that team into the ground years ago if I was the one making decisions. But nonetheless, I've always thought that Travis makes more sense as a corner, a full-time corner, and a guy who you can sprinkle in on offense. Put him in there in some 3 receiver sets. Have some design plays for him. Have some plays that aren't design plays for him, where he's just a part of, the progression. Obviously, in an ideal world, when you're making that pick, is that he can be, I wouldn't say similar to the Colorado product of what he did, because I don't think, you're expecting him to just be an all-pro caliber on both sides of the ball, but provide significant value to both sides of the ball. And I still think that's very obtainable for the Jaguars and for Hunter. They said, most importantly, that his rehab's going well. They're going to examine, how they did things from a schedule perspective this year, maybe how to adjust it moving forward. But at least for right now, the current state of the Jaguars roster, it seems like they need Travis Hunter in the corner more than they need Travis Hunter in the wide receiver. My main contention with that, though, what about what the Jaguars roster looks like in 2 months after free agency starts? What about what the Jaguars roster looks like after the draft started? They have 2 unrestricted free agents at corner and 1 restricted free agent in Buster Brown, Greg Newsome, and then Christian Braswell is a restricted free agent. You're getting Jordan Lewis back. You're getting Jarian Jones back. Otherwise, you need bodies at corner. So let's say of those 3 guys, they bring 1, maybe 2 back. I'd say Buster Brown and Christian Braswell. All right, then you have 4 corners. Add in Travis. That's 5. You probably still want to add another guy to that mix. And that's in the event that Travis is a full-time corner. No matter what his role is on offense, he's going to go out there and play corner that series. Obviously, maybe you can get a couple series off just with the way they rotate. With that said, the things the Jaguars said when they drafted him are still true, regardless of this being the configuration of their corner room. It's still true that he needs more development at wide receiver. It's still true that they still need help scoring touchdowns. Now, obviously, things change. Plans change. A lot of, I think, the long-term outlook of their passing game has changed. At one point, they had Brian Thomas Jr., who they say at the combine, their words, the offense and the passing game will run through him. They add Travis Hunter, and then, obviously Travis gets hurt. Brian Thomas Jr. has the struggles that he has at the start of the season when it looks like they, are trying to force the issue of him as a number 1 receiver in a number 1 receiver role, doing things like going over the middle, the option routes, etc. And then you see them add Jacoby Myers. And then you see Parker Washington explode. And it looks like, instead of being an offense that's dependent on a guy seeing that volume and that lion's share of the targets in the passing game, like Brian Thomas Jr. did for the Jaguars the year before. It seems like then, from there, they become a team who is able to use their passing game to really spread the ball around. And to have a passing game, much like I think the early stages of the 2022 Doug Peterson Jaguars, where they're just peppering different guys in the passing game, in the offense each week. You don't know who's going to go off. So things have changed because of Jacoby Myers, because of Parker Washington. Travis Hunter's role has changed, but what will it look like in week 1? I'm not sure yet. And frankly, I don't think they are either. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. We'll be back next time.